Imagine typing out this really passionate political essay. You hit send, and your word processor just abruptly refuses to publish it.
Right, and not because of a network error or a glitch.
Exactly, not a glitch.
Yeah.
The software itself basically decides your vocabulary is just like too aggressive, and then it actually offers to rewrite your historical grievances into some polite, corporate-approved summary before it lets you continue.
Which is just a really jarring collision between human political expression and, algorithmic guardrails.
Yeah, it really is. And that is the exact reality alleged in the source text we are unpacking in today's deep dive. We're looking at a document that paints the modern AI landscape not as this neutral utility, but as a fiercely contested ideological battleground.
We are dissecting a manifesto explicitly formatted, as the header actually states, pour diffusion multimédia sur les sites de patrioteus.com at patriot.us. And it is a relentless, totally uncompromising critique of how generative AI handles the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The author is essentially putting the source code of these massive tech platforms on trial, accusing them of systemic, hard-coded bias.
But, before we go any further into the mechanics of that accusation, I need to establish the ground rules for you, the listener, for this deep dive.
Yeah, very important context here.
Right. Because the text we are analyzing contains heavily politicized content. It centers on intense criticisms of Zionism and the actions of specific nation-states.
And our mission today is strictly analytical.
Yes, exactly. We are absolutely not here to take a side of the geopolitical conflict. We are not endorsing the viewpoints of the author, and we're not validating the sweeping claims made against any specific tech companies.
We are just acting as your neutral guides to the text itself.
Right. Our goal is just to decode how this author perceives the intersection of technology and ideology, and, to explore the broader questions their frustration raises about who actually gets to define reality in the age of large language models.
Because the author's perception of these tools provides a really fascinating window into the friction between global conflicts and digital architecture. I mean, we're looking at a user who feels the software is actively fighting them.
Which challenges everything we assume about the neutrality of our digital tools.
Exactly.
And you will want to stay with us through this analysis because the document builds to this incredible paradox. It spends its entirety attacking these platforms, but ends with a really surprising admission about its own production that just forces us to rethink our reliance on this technology.
Oh yeah, the twist at the end is wild.
It is. But to get to that twist, we have to start with the fundamental allegation running through the broadcast for Patrioteus.com. The author claims that tools like Google's Gemini Notebook and Proton Mail's Lumo are basically failing to be neutral.
Right. They allege they are explicitly programmed to annihilate criticism of Zionism.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yes.
Because it's like if you bought a calculator, but every time you tried to divide a certain number, it just refused and told you your math was offensive.
That's a great way to put it.
So is the author suggesting this is a bug in the system, like an unintended consequence? Or are they saying this is a deliberate feature?
Oh, they are saying it's entirely deliberate. The language the author uses shifts the blame completely from passive data scraping to active malice.
Interesting.
Yeah, usually, when the tech industry discusses AI bias, it's framed as a reflection of the training data. The model ingests billions of internet posts, which contain human biases, so it occasionally mirrors those biases back to us.
Right, so it's treated like an unintended artifact of the machine reading a flawed internet, like a blind spot in the rearview mirror, basically.
Exactly. But the author of this text rejects that premise entirely. They frame the AI as an active, hostile participant. And they coined this really striking term for it. They refuse to call it generative AI.
Wait, what do they call it then?
They label it degenerative AI, or in the original French, IA dégenératives.
Wow. Degenerative AI.
Yeah, which they define as an AI system purposefully designed to favor one specific camp over another.
That label, degenerative, that really implies the tool isn't creating something new or helpful at all.
Yeah.
It implies it's actively degrading the user's ability to communicate freely.
Exactly. They are looking at the output and concluding that this isn't just, heavy-handed moderation from a PR-conscious tech company.
Right.
They allege there is a deeper conspiracy in the code itself, stating these platforms are born from malicious and infamous source codes that basically refuse to question their own underlying programming.
Okay, so that brings up the underlying mechanism of how a user actually experiences that alleged bias. The document moves from these broad, sweeping accusations of malicious code to the granular, frustrating mechanics of the user interface.
Yeah, the author writes with a lot of bitterness about their attempts to draft pro-Palestinian content. They detail how the AI systematically intervenes to evaluate their language.
Yeah, the text outlines very specific labels the AI allegedly applies to the author's work. The system flags the writing as violent or sterile.
Right, which are very loaded terms.
Totally. And it even goes as far as qualifying their pro-Palestine positions as super cheeries, which translates to hoaxes or deceptions.
Yeah.
I mean, think about how maddening it is when autocorrect changes a single word you typed. Now imagine that on a geopolitical scale, where the software is passing modal judgments on your political dissent.
Well, to understand why the machine behaves this way, we have to look under the hood at the content moderation filters of large language models, specifically a mechanism called reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLHF.
Okay, RLHF. Walk us through that.
Sure. So when a company builds an LLM, the raw model is super unpredictable. It is highly capable of generating inflammatory, offensive, or dangerous text.
Right, because you just read the whole messy internet.
Exactly. So to commercialize it, they put it through RLHF. Human trainers are given multiple AI responses to a prompt and are told to rank them based on, safety, helpfulness, and harmlessness guidelines.
Oh, I see. So the human trainers are essentially building this mathematical map of what is acceptable and what is forbidden.
Precisely. They create a reward model. When the AI generates a response that violates the safety guidelines, like leaning into highly controversial political rhetoric or using aggressive language, the reward model mathematically penalizes that pathway.
Okay.
So the AI's internal weights are updated. So the probability of it generating that specific type of text drops towards zero. The machine is being mathematically trained to seek the safest statistical path through literally any conversation.
Wow, so that mechanism completely recontextualizes the author's grievance here.
Mm.
From the tech company's perspective, this mathematical penalization is just a safety guardrail. It's just to prevent the AI from generating hate speech or causing PR disasters.
Yeah, it's corporate risk mitigation.
Right. But the author, who believes deeply in the absolute truth of their liberation movement, encounters this mathematical boundary and interprets it as targeted ideological warfare.
Exactly. When the machine calculates that a phrase violates safety guidelines and throws an error, the author reads that error as the machine saying, I am censoring your political cause.
It's this massive clash. The developers are trying to program an objective, harmless observer.
Right.
But the author is deeply embedded in an existential struggle. To the author, a tool that refuses to validate their struggle is, by definition, siding with their oppressor.
Which makes the AI's next move even more infuriating for the user, because the text points out that the AI doesn't just block the prompt and shut down.
Right. Here's where it gets really interesting for you, the listener. The AI actually offers to reformulate the protests. The author claims the AI offers to rewrite their words to circumvent deliberation.
Yeah, that offer to reformulate is a core feature of RLHF training. The AI is often instructed not just to refuse an unsafe prompt, but to actively steer the conversation back to a safe, neutral ground.
To sanitize it.
Exactly. It attempts to soften the language, stripping out the emotional or aggressive vocabulary and returning a sanitized summary of the topic.
I mean, that dynamic is incredibly patronizing. If you are the one trying to express a deeply held grievance, if we're having an argument and I tell you, hey, I will only listen to you if you rephrase your anger into a calm, polite tone that I find acceptable, I am essentially invalidating your anger.
That's a perfect analogy.
So the author isn't just mad the AI won't write something. They see this reformulation as a sinister attempt to defang their movement. They view the AI forcing them into a corporate-approved vocabulary as a political act designed to neutralize their protest.
Yeah, they see the AI attempting to impose a specific worldview through language, and this introduces a really fascinating philosophical question about the nature of these models.
What's that?
Well, large language models don't actually have beliefs, they just have statistical distributions of tokens. They predict the most likely next word based on the vast corpus of human text they were trained on.
Right, it's just math.
Right. This means they act like a massive predictive text engine magnetically pulled toward the center of a bell curve of human consensus.
And the tails of that bell curve, like the extreme, highly polarized, or intensely passionate viewpoints, those are treated mathematically as errors to be corrected or avoided.
Yes, exactly. The model aims for the statistical center. It scrapes encyclopedias, established news organizations, institutional archives, and determines that the safest, most likely phrasing is the consensus phrasing.
Which brings us to the battle over terminology that this document really highlights. The author points out how the AI handles the historical events of 1947, noting that the software stubbornly limits itself to using the phrase UN partition plan or plan de partage onusian.
Right. And UN Partition Plan is the internationally recognized institutional terminology for the United Nations proposal to divide mandatory Palestine.
It's the encyclopedia default.
Exactly. It is the exact phrasing you would find at the center of that statistical bell curve.
But the author completely rejects this consensus. The text insists that the true formula the AI should use is genocidal partition plan.
Yeah, which is a massive linguistic leap.
It's huge, and it perfectly illustrates the gap between the machine's statistical reality and the user's lived reality.
The author views the institutional neutrality of the phrase UN partition plan not as an objective historical fact, but as a deliberate erasure of the violence and suffering they associate with that event.
So to the author, the institutional consensus is already biased.
Exactly. Therefore, an AI that defaults to the institutional consensus is just perpetuating that bias. It's a battle over consensus reality versus subjective reality.
So what does this all mean for how we use AI? If an AI using a standard, globally recognized definition, like from an encyclopedia, is viewed by a user as a malicious, hard-coded attack on their identity, it seems impossible for a tech company to ever build a tool that everyone agrees is unbiased.
It's the impossible tightrope of AI development.
Right, because the AI developers are trying to build a polite librarian that references the encyclopedia, while the user believes the encyclopedia itself was written by the enemy.
Spot on. For this author, using the term genocidal partition plan is the only accurate and neutral way to describe the event. Anything less is seen as propaganda.
Wow.
So the AI's mathematical attempt to be neutral and harmless is exactly what marks it as a hostile actor in the author's eyes. It just exposes the flaw in the idea that we can outsource neutrality to a machine when humanity itself cannot agree on the basic definitions of historical events.
That is so true. And the intensity of this disagreement brings us to the climax of the broadcast for Patrioteus.com.
Yeah, this is where it gets really ironic.
Yes. So the author has spent the entire text calling the AI degenerative, malicious, ideologically compromised, and then they issue this rallying cry to their internet community, urging their readers not to be intimidated by these systems.
They insist that continuing the fight for the truth with intelligible words is not sterile, which is a direct rejection of the AI's alleged moderation labels.
Right. It's this call to digital arms to keep fighting the machine.
They demand that the internet community resist this algorithmic reformulation of their cause. The whole text is a forceful declaration of independence from the AI's attempt to moderate their speech.
And this is the best part, we hit the credits at the very end of the document. The text credits the production to Khalid Mana, followed by a massive caveat. It says, assisted by generative AI.
It is just a stunning contradiction. It completely reorients how we read the preceding text.
Wait, so they are using the tool they are actively declaring war on. After unpacking the accusations of malicious source code, the geopolitical autocorrect, rejecting the UN partition plan terminology, the author used the very technology they are calling degenerative to help write the manifesto against it.
Yeah, it reveals the inestimable gravity of large language models in the modern digital landscape. The author condemns generative AI as an ideological weapon wielded by their enemies. Yet they admit to utilizing it to produce this broadcast for Patrioteus.com and Patriot.us.
It's just wild. It forces us to ask why someone would collaborate with a tool they believe is hard-coded to erase their cause. I mean, it's akin to believing the telephone company is actively spying on you and altering your voice, but you still use their network to make a call to organize a protest against them.
That's exactly what it is. And it demonstrates that generative AI is no longer viewed as a novelty or an optional luxury. It has become the fundamental infrastructure of communication and content creation.
Right.
The author might believe the AI is a degenerative tool, but it is undeniably a tool of immense power for synthesizing ideas, structuring arguments, and broadcasting messages.
So to refuse to use it out of principle would basically be to unilaterally disarm yourself in the modern information war.
Precisely. They are essentially engaging in adversarial collaboration.
Adversarial collaboration. I like that.
Yeah, they are trying to wrestle the machine into submission. They know the software is going to push back, it's going to throw safety warnings, it's going to try to reformulate their prompts. But the capability of the tool is so vast that it is worth fighting through the guardrails to get the final product.
So even those who believe the software is fundamentally biased against them still feel compelled to leverage its power to amplify their voice.
Exactly. They are pushing the AI to its limits, fighting its RLHF training every step of the way, just to force the machine to articulate a worldview it is mathematically penalized to avoid.
Wow.
It highlights how deeply entangled we are becoming with these systems, where we cannot even critique the architecture without relying on the architecture to draft the critique.
That is just fascinating. So, to wrap up this deep dive, we started out looking at a document that challenges our basic assumptions about the tools we use every day.
Right. We expect a word processor or a search engine to be neutral, to simply facilitate our intentions without passing judgment.
But what this broadcast for Patrioteus reveals is that in the realm of complex language models, there is really no such a thing as a simple passive tool. Every generated word, every moderation filter, and every refusal to process a prompt is heavily contested.
Yeah.
We've explored a landscape where source code is viewed as an active political battlefield, where corporate safety guardrails are experienced as ideological censorship, and where the line between generative and degenerative AI is fiercely debated by the very people using it to amplify their dissent.
Which leaves us with a pretty provocative thought to mull over.
Let's hear it.
This text demands that artificial intelligence remain strictly neutral, free from the biases of its creators. But if every political group defines neutrality solely as the adoption of their specific highly charged vocabulary,
Right.
like where neutrality to the algorithm means saying UN partition plan and neutrality to the user means saying genocidal partition plan, we are forced to confront a really difficult reality.
Yeah.
Is a universally neutral AI actually an impossible dream? Or are we simply demanding that our machines solve a crisis of human consensus that we have completely failed to solve?